Iain Canning, Shakespeare's Macbeth has been adapted so many times on screen. What did you and your team feel they could bring to it that was unique and different?
I think it started with the adaptation, and the adaptation started with this battle at the start. And normally in adaptations, they sort of come in on the play and they have lots of people stepping over dead bodies in fog, and you sort of pretend that the battle has happened, and then you go straight into the storytelling. And we just felt that the whole setup and emotional state of the story was sort of explained by the battle, and so it was incredibly important, given the emotional journey of the characters in the film, to start with this battle and to give it scale and actually to bring it back to more of a feel of the time where Macbeth was living, and so it was seeing those aspects to the script, and then piece by piece as the filmmaking team came together, it became incredibly clear how each of those elements were going to bring something new and special to this adaptation.
Hmm. Well, what drew you to it? Because I mean, like I said, there's been countless adaptations, and people are still adapting Shakespeare. Not just Macbeth, but all of his plays. So,
Yeah.
what is it that drew you to do this as a producer?
I think I can remember going through my schooling and doing my A level in English literature in the UK, and basically binge watching Much Ado About Nothing in Kenneth Branagh's adaptation, in the hope that I would pass my exam, and I did. And so I've always had this sort of slight sort of feeling of responsibility that somehow I've got to, if I ever became a producer, to make a film like this, to give to a whole new generation, and to have Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard play those roles. It brings a whole new aspect to 2 hours in the classroom that they maybe didn't think they were going to get. But I think in terms of storytelling, we are really attracted into the idea of this post-traumatic stress disorder aspect of it, and also to explore a Lady Macbeth that wasn't a cliche, power-driven, obsessive wife that was controlling her man and making him do terrible things. We wanted to add a layer of emotional, I guess, an emotional through line for that character, even though actually in the play she's pretty quick in terms of deciding to go about the murdering. We wanted to give that a sort of emotional depth that maybe hadn't been in other adaptations.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you start with, of course, the text of it. Um, let's talk about the writing of the screenplay and finding. Do you start with the actual words in the Shakespeare monologues and then figure out ways to visualize or reinterpret these ideas that you're talking about, or where does that come from?
I think you layer in the things that are going to be important in terms of the contemporary retelling, not in the sense that it's a contemporary set piece, but more in terms of what's going to resonate for a contemporary audience. So in terms of the academic fields and in terms of interpretation, there's been a lot of more recent analysis about the idea that the Macbeths are dealing with the fact that they have lost a child. And so we play that through the film. And so there's certain aspects that we've dealt with cinematically in the film that then are really charged and help charge the language going through. So I've Given Suck has an extra resonance to it if you know that they've lost a child. So I think you come at it that way, and I think then you realize as an audience member, certain phrases and certain elements of language that you've been saying for years are actually from this play, and you never realized that it was from the play, perhaps, that those sort of sentences came about. So there's definitely moments of the greatest hits of the play coming through, and when you Dagger I See Before Me, and so on and so on. So it's but then also those are challenges in the sense that we just couldn't see an adaptation of this type in this version where we had Hubble Bubble Toil and Trouble. We just couldn't see that. So sadly that didn't make it to the shoot. So I think you have extra bits that have new levels because of the cinematic storytelling, and then you've got to sort of sometimes decide on some aspects that aren't going to make it for the film.
Mm-hmm. And what struck me as I was watching it was that it felt both traditional and non-traditional at the same time. You know, traditional in that you don't try to reinvent the setting; it's still Scotland, but non-traditional in the fact that stylistically it feels very modern. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, it was. Well, that's Justin, and how he blends those two styles together. I think also it's perspective. I think we really wanted to get into Macbeth's head. We wanted it to be a film cinematic experience, so it's very much from his perspective rather than filming it in a way where it feels like it's a stage and we're just following characters in a more broad ensemble kind of point of view. So I think the first battle be an example of that, but then throughout the film is you're definitely being pulled into the mindset of those two lead characters, and I think that probably that feels more contemporary rather than it feeling like it's a theatrical cast bringing you the play shot on film.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a bit more about Justin Kurzel. What made him the right director to realize this vision of the film?
We had seen, we're a UK and Australian company, so we track obviously talent directors from both those countries, and I think that what was incredibly what I got personally, and I know my producing partner Emil got out of the Snowtown Murders, was it was really a story about a central male character that was a leader in a community and who had seduced through in somewhat hero worship had seduced a community into allowing him to do bad things, and it felt very clear to then apply that. When you apply that to Macbeth, it seems very clear that that's also the story of Macbeth, which is about a man, a couple that through a community get them to follow him through acts of evil. And I think that Justin had already designed the play as a production designer for theatre, so he was very close to it, and so the combination of those two things, and also he's just such an impressive stylist.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I'm just.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, there you're back again. Let's also talk about Michael Fassbender, because you'd worked with him before on a couple of films, Shame and Slow West and Hunger. Was he always your first choice for Macbeth? Was he an obvious choice for that?
He was. When we optioned the material, he was our only choice for it, really. We sent it to him first, so he was attached before Justin came on board. We sent in the script and sort of waited for the phone not to ring, and he came back and said that he wanted to do it, and then it completely made sense. I mean, he's got an incredible intensity, Michael, and the Shakespeare sort of bubbles through him, like he was sort of born to play that role, and I think we couldn't really see it being so centered and so emotionally and complex with anyone else. So it was very, very lucky and very wonderful that he was brave enough to take it on.
Mm-hmm. And then Marion Cotillard, you talked about finding new layers in Lady Macbeth. I'm sure finding the right Lady Macbeth was a huge part of that. So what made her right for it?
It was very clear. Actually, it was a conversation between Justin and Michael. They were talking about actresses that Michael definitely wanted to work with, in terms of people he hadn't collaborated with, and people that Justin wanted to work with. And they brought us the idea of Marion. And I think at first you say, well, that's an incredible challenge. there was no history of Marion playing Lady Macbeth in French or in English. She's a French actress. She's worked in the English language, but this is verse. And I just think there's just such an emotional truth to Marion and the way that she takes on roles. We just had to be brave enough that if she was brave enough to say yes, that she was going to be the right person to play that part. And she was just stunning, absolutely stunning. There's a whole different level to Lady Macbeth, and there's a whole depth looking in her eyes as things start to take a turn for the worse, where you see a woman, an actor, a person losing control of her life. And we were very lucky and very privileged to work with her, and it was a huge challenge for her. And she did an incredible job.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it would be a huge challenge for any actor. I mean, there's a way of saying Shakespeare that can be very theatrical and very kind of sing-songy. So was that something that had to be worked out? And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, I mean, was that a difficulty for the two of them to find the right rhythm for Shakespeare's language so that it would both make sense but also not come across as stagey in this film?
Well, the difference between, obviously the difference between the theatre and film is that you don't have to project to the cinema audience. That Dolby and the sound system will do that for you. So it seemed very clear and very early on that if you're going to commit a murder, you're not going to shout about it so that everybody else in the village can hear. Whereas the theatre has a certain need in terms of hitting everybody in the back seats, they're conspiring and committing a murder, and that has to be intimate, and that has to say something about their relationship. And so the rhythm of that was very important to get, but it was really more a sort of taking the verse and being free to be intimate with it, rather than necessarily thinking that it had to be shouted from the rooftops.
Right. And as a producer, you have to both find ways to facilitate the vision of the filmmakers while at the same time keeping the production on track and on budget and on schedule. So how do you balance those two things, especially in something that is such a vastly complicated period film as this is, with lots of battles and,
I think you have to cut your cloth in the most appropriate ways. I mean, we knew that I think we were sort of helped also by the period aspect of it in terms of the real time, because it wasn't as if when he became king he had the most elaborate lifestyle of all time. It was more about power and feeding the community that you were with, rather than it was necessarily crowning yourself with incredible jewels. So there wasn't a sort of a massive need in order to sort of create that sort of jump up when he becomes king. However, what was incredibly important for us was to make sure that the film was full of action and energy, and so that's where we really focused. And also Justin was incredibly keen and right to want a 300, as near to a 360 scope in terms of the camera, to get into the sense of the landscape. And apart from getting to the landscape, it is free. So it is a wonderful it's a wonderful free aspect of production. It's the mountains in the background.
Oh yes, of course. Now you won an Oscar 5 years ago for The King's Speech. Can you talk a bit about that? I mean, this is a little movie that was made for practically no money. It grossed over 100 million and was this huge success. So, I mean, was that a validating experience, winning that Oscar for this film?
It was, but it was also sort of strangely. I sort of describe it in some ways of being in the middle of a hurricane. Is that I felt like I was in the middle of it, and around me there was sort of houses flying and cars and chairs. It felt like this sort of incredible thing that was happening around. I was also shooting shame at the same time.
Oh wow.
As it was sort of the war season, so I was doing night shoots in New York in the freezing cold. So it felt, though, there was a nice mix of glamour and reality through the whole thing. But it was hugely surprising and wonderful, and yeah, it was and a surprise. We went into that film making a film about a king that not many people knew that very much about, and a stutter, and about a speech therapist helping him. And we didn't expect it to be anywhere near the success that it was. We just wanted to sort of make our first real producing feature as a company at the time, and it had Australian elements and it had UK elements. So we were over the moon when we got it made. So then for everything to come out of that, and there's still letters that we get to the office from people who suffer from self-confidence or stammers or stutters, and it's wonderful to make a film where it actually helps people to get the confidence to be strong and live their lives. And we never saw any of that coming, really. And to win an Oscar was just the most incredible way to end that experience.
You've made a ton of really diverse and adventurous films. I mean, some of your credits, like The King's Speech and Shame, Top the Lake for TV, and this Macbeth. What is it that drives you as a producer to choose some of these projects?
The filmmakers and the stories. So for us, it's about whether we believe in a filmmaker in the way that they're going to tell the story, that they're going to be passionate, they're going to be a great leader in terms of pushing the film through production and being inspiring for all of the crew. And I think also just a story that says something about the world, that may shift things slightly, that will look at the way we live now in a sort of slightly different way. And it's hard to really capture what that is. And then thirdly, really, probably, is our ability as a company to commit to that filmmaking team, whoever that be, whether it's a script or a writer or a director, and say we believe that we will be able to finance your film, and we will be able to go out and raise the money for it. So I think it's the combination of incredibly talented collaborating in terms of filmmakers, and then a story which is going to sort of hopefully connect with people and say something about the world that we live in, and then also our ability to finance those films.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.